It's incredible that we're all connecting from so many different places. I'd love to know where you're joining from. Let me know your country and the time in the comments. It's great to have you here. My grandmother never sang, not at birthdays, not at Christmas, not even when we begged her. She'd just smile that sad, faraway smile and say, "My voice is gone, children. It left me a long time ago." We thought she meant old age. We thought wrong. It was the summer of 2003, and I was 17 years old. My name is Sarah Kaufman, and my grandmother, Rivka, was dying. Cancer, the doctor said, spreading through her body like darkness through water. She'd been moved to hospice care in a quiet facility outside Philadelphia, surrounded by gardens she was too weak to visit. My mother and aunts took turns sitting with her, holding her hand, telling her it was okay to let go. But Grandma Rivka held on like she was waiting for something. One afternoon, I sat alone with her while my mother went to get coffee. Grandma's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and rattling. The afternoon sun came through the window, painting gold stripes across her blanket. I held her hand, so small now, like bird bones wrapped in paper-thin skin. I started humming without thinking, just some random melody to fill the terrible silence. Grandma's eyes snapped open. Her grip tightened on my hand with shocking strength. "Don't," she whispered, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Don't sing that." I stopped immediately, confused and frightened. "I'm sorry, Grandma, I didn't mean..." She cut me off, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "I need to tell you something before I go, before the silence takes me forever." Her accent grew thicker, the Polish inflection she'd spent 60 years trying to erase suddenly flooding back. "I need to tell you about the lullaby, about the song that saved my life and cost someone else theirs." My mother came back then with 2 styrofoam cups of terrible coffee, but Grandma Rivka shook her head. "Call your sisters," she told my mother. "Call everyone. This story, I can only tell it once." Within 2 hours, my mother's 3 sisters and my 6 cousins crowded into that small hospice room. We sat on the floor, on chairs, on the windowsill, all of us silent as Grandma Rivka gathered the strength to speak. Her voice was barely a whisper, but we heard every word. And what she told us changed everything we thought we knew about survival, sacrifice, and the unbearable weight of living when others die. I was born in 1925 in a village called WWII in southern Poland, a small place, maybe 3,000 people. Half were Jewish. We had a synagogue, a market, a school. My father was a tailor. My mother baked bread that people came from 3 villages away to buy. I had 2 younger brothers, Mordecai and Jacob, and I had a voice. She paused, swallowing hard. My Aunt Rachel brought her water, held the straw to her lips. Grandma took a small sip and continued. "People said I sang like an angel. I sang at weddings, at festivals, at Shabbat services. My mother said God gave me the voice to bring joy into the world. I believed her. I was 15 years old and stupid enough to think my voice could protect me from anything." The war came in September 1939. Grandma's voice went flat as she described it. German soldiers marching into WWII, the yellow stars they forced Jews to wear, the restrictions that came like a tightening noose. No school, no business, no walking in certain streets. Her father's tailor shop was closed. Her mother's bakery was confiscated. By 1942, the village was being liquidated. All Jews were ordered to assemble in the market square for relocation. We knew what relocation meant. We weren't stupid. We heard whispers about camps, about trains that went one direction and never came back. My father, your great-grandfather Solomon, he made a plan. He had a Christian friend, a farmer named Peter Kowalski, who lived outside the village. Peter agreed to hide us in his barn. It would cost everything we had left. My mother's jewelry, my father's tools, every zloty we'd saved. but we'd be alive. The night before the relocation order, the Kaufman family snuck out of their house in darkness. Rivka, her parents, her 2 little brothers. They walked 3 miles through the forest to Peter's farm, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs. Peter met them at the barn with a lantern and fear in his eyes. "If they find you," he whispered, "they'll kill all of us, my wife, my children, everyone. You must be completely silent." He showed them the hiding place, a space beneath the barn floor accessed through a trapdoor hidden under hay bales. It was maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, with the ceiling so low they had to crawl. 5 people would live in that space for the next 7 months. "We climbed down into the dark," Grandma said, her voice breaking. "Papa went first, then Mama, then the boys. I went last." Peter put the hay bales back over the trapdoor, and the darkness swallowed us whole. Living in that space was like being buried alive. No light, no fresh air, just the smell of dirt and fear and 5 people trying not to breathe too loud. Peter brought them food once a day after dark, scraps mostly, whatever his family could spare without arousing suspicion. A bucket in the corner served as their toilet. They emptied it themselves, once a week, in the dead of night under Peter's watchful guard. The hardest part wasn't the hunger. It wasn't even the darkness. It was the silence. We couldn't talk above a whisper, couldn't cough, couldn't cry. German soldiers came to inspect farms regularly, looking for hidden Jews. If they heard anything, we were dead. Her mother would hold Mordecai and Jacob, 7 and 9 years old, and rock them silently when they cried for sunlight, for space, for their old lives. Rivka's job was to keep her brothers quiet during the day. She'd make up silent games, pretending to draw pictures in the dark, acting out stories with hand gestures they could barely see. But sometimes, when the boys couldn't take it anymore, when they started to panic in the suffocating blackness, Rivka would do the only thing that helped. She'd sing, not loud, barely a whisper, her lips next to their ears. Lullabies her mother had sung to her, folk songs from before the war. Anything to transport them out of that hole in the ground and into a world where light and music still existed. My mother would beg me to stop, Grandma said, tears streaming freely now. She'd say it was too dangerous, but I couldn't watch my brothers suffer. So I'd wait until she was asleep, and I'd sing so quietly that only they could hear. The same lullaby every night, an old Polish song about a bird that flew so high it touched the moon. She hummed a few bars, the first music I'd ever heard her make. It was beautiful and broken. That song became their hope, their reason to survive one more day. 6 months passed in that darkness. Winter came, and the cold seeped through the floorboards until they slept huddled together for warmth. Rivka's father grew weaker. Not enough food, not enough movement, not enough hope. Her mother's hair turned completely white. But the boys survived, kept alive by their sister's whispered lullabies and the promise that someday, somehow, this would end. Then came March 1943. Peter climbed into their hole in the middle of the night, his face white with terror. "They know," he whispered. "Someone informed. The Germans are coming tomorrow to search every farm in the district. I can't protect you anymore." Rivka's father began to argue, but Peter cut him off. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You have until dawn to leave. After that, my family dies too." They climbed out of their hole for the last time as the sun rose cold and gray. Rivka's legs barely worked after 6 months in that cramped space. Her brothers cried at the brightness, covering their eyes. Peter gave them what little food he could spare. Half a loaf of bread, some dried sausage, a canteen of water. He said, "Head east," pointing towards the forest. "There are partisan groups hiding in the woods. Maybe they'll take you. Maybe not. But staying here means certain death." The Kaufman family stumbled into the forest as the March dawn broke cold and gray. Rivka's father carried Jacob on his back. Her mother held Mordecai's hand. Rivka walked behind them, her legs shaking with every step, her eyes scanning the trees for any sign of safety or danger. They walked for 2 hours before they heard it, the sound that would haunt Rivka for the rest of her life. Dogs. German soldiers used dogs to track escaped Jews through the forest. The barking was distant, but getting closer.
"We started running," Grandma said, her voice barely audible now. "Papa put Jacob down and we ran, but we were weak. 6 months without movement, without proper food. The soldiers were trained and fast. We could hear them gaining on us, boots crashing through underbrush, dogs snarling, voices shouting in German. They ran until Rivka's mother collapsed, just fell into the mud and couldn't get up. Rivka's father tried to lift her, but she pushed him away. "Take the children," she gasped. "Run. I'll slow them down." Rivka's father refused, stood there arguing precious seconds while the soldiers got closer. Finally, Rivka's mother grabbed his face with both hands. "Solomon, look at me. Our children need you. I'm done running. Let me do this one last thing. Let me save them." She kissed him once, hard and final. Then she kissed each of her children. When she got to Rivka, she whispered, "Take care of your brothers. Sing for them. Promise me." Rivka promised through her tears. Her mother stood up then, turned away from her family, and walked back toward the sound of the dogs. She started singing, loud and clear, her voice carrying through the trees. A Yiddish prayer song, the same one she'd sung every Friday night before the war. The soldiers heard her, changed direction, followed her voice. Rivka's father grabbed Mordecai and Jacob and pulled Rivka in the opposite direction. They ran. Rivka looked back once and saw her mother standing in a clearing, arms spread wide, singing at the top of her lungs while German soldiers surrounded her. Then the trees blocked her view. They never saw her again. For 3 days, they walked through the forest, hiding during the day, moving at night. Rivka's father knew they were being hunted, knew that every moment above ground was borrowed time. On the 4th day, exhausted and starving, they stumbled into a partisan camp. 32 Polish and Jewish resistance fighters living in caves and makeshift shelters deep in the woods. The leader was a man named Kazimierz Nowak, a former Polish army officer with a scar across his face and eyes that had seen too much death. He looked at the Kaufman family, a middle-aged tailor, a teenage girl, and 2 half-starved children, and shook his head. "We're not a refugee camp," he said bluntly. "We're fighters. If you can't fight, you're a liability." Rivka's father stepped forward. "I can repair uniforms, mend boots, fix equipment. My daughter can cook, clean, gather firewood. The boys can—" Kazimierz cut him off. "The boys are dead weight, and you look half dead yourself. I'm sorry. We can't take you." Rivka felt something break open inside her. Her mother had died to save them, and now this man was going to send them back into the forest to die anyway? Before she could think, before she could stop herself, she started singing. Not the lullaby, not something quiet and safe. She sang the Polish national anthem, the one that had been banned by the Germans, the one that meant hope and resistance and refusal to surrender. Her voice rang through the camp, clear and strong, carrying all the pain and fury and desperate hope of a girl who'd lost everything. When she finished, the camp was silent. Kazimierz stared at her with something like wonder in his scarred face. "We haven't heard that song in 3 years," he said quietly. "The Nazis took our country, they took our language, they took our songs, but they didn't take your voice." He looked at Rivka's father. "Your family can stay, but the girl sings. Every night, she reminds us what we're fighting for." So Rivka became the voice of the partisan camp. Every evening, as the fighters gathered around their small fires, she sang Polish folk songs, Yiddish prayers, resistance anthems. Her voice became their hope, their reminder that beauty and humanity still existed in a world gone mad with hate. The fighters protected her family fiercely, not just as refugees, but as treasures worth defending. Months passed. Summer turned to fall. The partisan group grew bolder, sabotaging supply lines, rescuing Jews from transport trains, gathering intelligence. Rivka's father worked himself nearly to death, mending their clothes and equipment. Her brothers slowly regained strength, started to smile again, and every night, Rivka sang the lullaby that had kept them alive in the darkness. The fighters would listen, these hard men with blood on their hands and death in their eyes, and some of them would cry. December 1943. The partisan camp was hit during a German sweep of the forest. Rivka woke to the sound of gunfire and screaming. The Germans had surrounded them in the night, 30 soldiers against 32 partisans. Casimir shouted for everyone to scatter, to run, to survive. Rivka's father grabbed Mordecai. She grabbed Jakob. They ran into the darkness as bullets tore through the trees around them. They got separated in the chaos. Rivka and Jakob went one direction. Her father and Mordecai went another. Rivka ran until her lungs burned, dragging her 10-year-old brother through the frozen forest. Behind them, she could hear soldiers, dogs, death getting closer. Jakob was crying, exhausted, ready to give up. Rivka pulled him into a hollow beneath the roots of a fallen tree. They huddled there in the darkness, Jakob's face pressed against her chest, both of them trying not to breathe. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. A German soldier stopped right next to their hiding place. She could see his boots through the roots, black leather, polished despite the mud. She pressed her hand over Jakob's mouth, felt his tears hot against her palm. They were caught. They were dead. The soldier stood there for an eternity. Then Jakob started to panic. He couldn't breathe with Rivka's hand over his mouth. He started struggling, making small sounds. The soldier heard. He crouched down, pushed aside the roots, and looked directly at them. He was young, maybe 20 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and a face that should have been at university, not hunting children in a frozen forest. He stared at Rivka and Jakob. Rivka stared back, waiting for him to shoot or drag them out. Instead, he put one finger to his lips, the universal gesture for silence. Then he did something impossible. He started to stand up, to walk away. But Jakob, terrified and desperate, grabbed Rivka tighter and started crying. The sound was small, but unmistakable in the quiet forest. The soldier froze, turned back. Rivka knew what was about to happen. He couldn't let them go now. His fellow soldiers would hear Jakob crying, would find them, would know this young German had let Jews escape. He'd be executed alongside them. So Rivka did the only thing she could think of. She started singing. Not loud, not the anthem, the lullaby, the same song she had sung to her brothers in the darkness beneath Peter's barn, the song about the bird who flew so high it touched the moon. The German soldiers stood
absolutely still as Rivka sang, her voice barely above a whisper, her arms wrapped around Jakob. She sang the first verse, the second, watching the German's face. He wasn't moving, wasn't calling for backup, just listening with an expression she couldn't read. Pain, maybe, or memory, or something too complicated for a 17-year-old girl to understand. When she finished, the soldier crouched down again. He spoke in German, which Rivka understood. Her father had taught her before the war. "My mother sang that song," he said quietly, "when I was small, before—" He stopped, shook his head. "You have to stop him from crying. They'll hear." Rivka nodded, pulled Jakob closer, and whispered to him in Polish to be brave, to be silent, to trust her. Jakob buried his face in her coat and went still. The soldier reached into his pack and pulled out half a chocolate bar. Real chocolate, more valuable than gold in the winter forest. He handed it to Jakob, who took it with shaking hands. Then the soldier pulled out a compass and a small map. He pointed to a spot on the map. "There's a farm, 15 kilometers northeast. The farmer's name is Kowalski. He hides people like you. If you can reach him before dawn, you might survive." Rivka stared at him. "Why are you helping us?" The soldier's face went hard. "Because my mother would be ashamed of what I've become. Because I'm tired of killing
Children. Because," his voice broke, "because maybe if someone shows mercy to me someday, God will remember this." He stood up, brushed off his uniform, and walked away. 10 steps later, he stopped and turned back. "If anyone asks, I never saw you. And if we meet again, if I see you again in uniform or in battle, I won't hesitate. This mercy ends here. Understood?" Rivka nodded. The soldier disappeared into the trees. 30 seconds later, she heard him shouting in German to his comrades, "Nothing here, just animal tracks. Move to the next sector." Rivka and Jakob stayed in that hollow until the sounds of the search party faded completely. Then she pulled out the map, oriented herself using the compass, and started walking northeast. Jakob ate the chocolate in tiny bites, making it last, asking every few minutes if the German soldier was an angel. Rivka didn't have an answer. She just knew they were alive and they had a chance. And sometimes mercy came from the most impossible places. They walked all night. Jakob fell asleep on Rivka's back, exhausted. She carried him, her legs shaking, using the stars and the compass to guide them. Dawn was breaking
when she saw the farmhouse, exactly where the map said it would be. She approached carefully, terrified it might be a trap. But when she knocked, a middle-aged Polish man answered. "Kowalski?" she whispered. He looked at her, at the boy on her back, at their yellow stars. "Inside," he said, quickly. Pyotr Kowalski, a different man, no relation to the farmer who'd first hidden them, gave Rivka and Jacob food, clean clothes, and a place in his barn, not underground this time, in the hayloft, where they could see sunlight through the cracks and breathe fresh air. "German patrols don't come this far east often," he explained, "but you still need to be careful. Stay quiet during the day. I'll bring food when I can." For 2 weeks, it was almost peaceful. Rivka and Jacob slowly recovered their strength. She sang to him every night, the lullaby, other songs, anything to keep hope alive. But her heart ached constantly with worry about her father and Mordecai. Were they alive? Had they escaped the raid on the partisan camp? She had no way of knowing, no way to search without exposing herself and Jacob to danger. Then one morning, Kowalski climbed into the hayloft with a newspaper. His face was gray. "I need to show you something," he said quietly. He unfolded the paper to an inside page. There, in grainy black and white, was a photograph. German soldiers standing over bodies. The caption read, "Partisan terrorists eliminated in forest operation." Rivka's hand shook as she took the paper. She scanned the photograph, praying she wouldn't see what she knew she would. And there, among the bodies, she recognized her father's coat, the one she'd mended herself 100 times. Next to him, smaller, was Mordecai. Rivka didn't scream, didn't cry. She just folded the newspaper very carefully and handed it back to Kowalski. "Thank you for showing me," she said, her voice perfectly calm. Then she climbed down from the hayloft, walked out into the cold January morning, and collapsed in the snow. Jacob found her there an hour later, curled into a ball, silent and shaking. He crawled into her arms, and they held each other while the world continued turning without their family in it. That night, Rivka tried to sing the lullaby to Jacob. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The song was gone. Her voice was gone. Everything was gone except the terrible, suffocating weight of survival. Jacob cried himself to sleep in her arms, and Rivka stared at the darkness and understood that she'd traded her voice for her brother's life. The German soldier had shown mercy, but mercy had a price, and she would pay it every day for the rest of her life. Kowalski found them a smuggler who could get them across the border into Soviet-controlled territory. It cost everything the German soldiers' chocolate had been worth. Rivka traded the compass for safe passage. In February 1944, she and Jacob crossed into Soviet Ukraine, were placed in a refugee camp in Germany after the war ended. They immigrated to America in 1947. Rivka was 22 years old. Jacob was 14. They were all that was left of the Kaufman family. In America, Rivka became Rebecca. She anglicized her name, learned English, got a job in a textile factory in Philadelphia. She met my grandfather, David, at a synagogue social in 1949. He was a kind man, gentle, a survivor himself from a different camp with different nightmares. They understood each other without having to explain. They married in 1950, had 3 daughters, built a quiet, ordinary life. But Rebecca never sang, not once. At her wedding, when the rabbi asked for a song, she shook her head. At her daughters' birthdays, she'd smile and clap while others sang. When they asked why she never joined in, she'd say her voice was broken. And that was true enough. How do you explain that your voice died the day you watched your mother walk toward Nazi soldiers singing a prayer? How do you explain that singing saved your life but cost everyone else's theirs? Jacob, who became Jack in America, tried to talk to her about it once. Years later, they were sitting on her porch in 1967, watching her grandchildren play in the yard. "Do you ever think about the lullaby?" he asked. Rebecca's hands tightened on her coffee cup. "I do. Every day," she said. "Then why don't you sing it anymore?" Jack asked. Rebecca looked at him with eyes that held decades of survivor's guilt. "Because I survived by singing while Mama died. Because I survived while Papa and Mordecai died. because a Nazi soldier showed me mercy while he murdered millions of others. Every time I think about singing, I think about who paid the price for my voice, and I can't bear it. Jack died in 1995, a heart attack, sudden and final. At his funeral, people expected Rebecca to sing "Surely Now" for her brother, for the boy she'd carried through the forest and kept alive with lullabies. But she stood silent at his graveside, tears streaming down her face, her mouth pressed closed against the songs that would never come again. After the funeral, she went home to her empty house and understood that she was the last one left. The only Kaufman who remembered Zawarchi, the hiding place, the partisan camp, the German soldier, the only one who carried all those ghosts. She lived with that silence for 8 more years, taught her grandchildren to cook, told them sanitized stories about Poland that skipped over all the death, smiled when they asked about her childhood. And every night, alone in her bed, she'd hum the lullaby silently, moving her lips without sound, singing to ghosts who couldn't hear her anymore. Until cancer came. Until she was dying in a hospice bed with her granddaughter humming random melodies. Until she realized that if she didn't tell the story now, it would die with her. And the German soldier's impossible mercy, her mother's sacrifice, her father's courage, her brother's resilience, all of it would disappear like it never happened. So she gathered her family and told them everything, every chapter of the story she'd carried in silence for 60 years. When Grandma Rivka finished her story, the hospice room was absolutely silent except for the sound of 7 people crying. My mother held her hand. My aunts held each other. I sat on the floor, my entire understanding of my family history shattered and rebuilt in the space of 2 hours. Finally, my Aunt Rachel spoke. "Mama," she said gently, "you survived. You did nothing wrong. You don't have to feel guilty for living." Grandma shook her head weakly. "You don't understand. The German soldier, he spared us because I sang. He had a choice between duty and mercy, and my voice reminded him of his humanity. But what about all the others who died? The ones who couldn't sing? Were their lives worth less?" She was crying now, these terrible, racking sobs. "I got to live. I got to marry, to have children, to be your grandmother, and they got mass graves and forgotten names. How is that fair? How is that anything but proof that I should have died too?" My mother, who I'd never seen cry before that moment, leaned close to Grandma's face. "You want to know how it's fair? It's not. It will never be fair. But you know what would be unfair? If you died and took their story with you. If nobody ever knew about Solomon and Mordecai and Jacob. If nobody ever knew that partisan fighters sang around
fires in the forest. If nobody ever knew that sometimes, in the darkest moments of human history, a boy in a Nazi uniform chose mercy over murder. You don't carry their ghosts as punishment, Mama. You carry them as witnesses. And now you've passed that witness to us." Grandma Rivka looked at all of us, her daughters, her grandchildren, and something shifted in her face. Like a weight she'd carried for 60 years, finally found somewhere to rest besides her shoulders alone.
Will you remember them? She whispered. We promised. All of us. We would remember. Then my 10-year-old cousin Emma, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. Grandma, will you teach us the lullaby so we can remember it too? Everyone held their breath. Grandma Rivka closed her eyes. For a long moment, I thought she'd refuse, that the silence was too deep, the guilt too strong. But then she opened her mouth and began to sing. Soft and cracked and broken, but singing. The Polish lullaby about the bird who flew so high it touched the moon. Her voice was nothing like it had been in the forest. Age and grief and 60 years of silence had taken most of it away. But it was still the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard, because it wasn't just a song. It was survival. It was memory. It was proof that love and mercy and humanity could exist even in hell. When she finished, she taught it to us, line by line. We sang it together, 7 voices joining hers, learning the melody and the Polish words we couldn't quite pronounce. Grandma Rivka died 3 days later, peacefully in her sleep, with her daughters holding her hands. At her funeral, we sang the lullaby. All of us, standing around her grave, singing in broken Polish and tears. People stared. Some asked what the song meant. We told them. We told them everything about the hiding place and the partisan camp and the German soldier and the brother she'd carried through the forest. We told them because she trusted us with her story. And stories like that don't belong in silence. They belong in the light. I'm 55 years old now, and I still sing that lullaby. I sing it to my own grandchildren. I've taken them to Sea, to the forest where their great-great-grandmother walked, to the Holocaust Museum where we've donated Grandma Rivka's testimony. Every year on the anniversary of her death, our family gathers and we sing. We sing for Solomon and Mordecai and Jacob. We sing for the partisan fighters. We sing for the unnamed German soldier who chose mercy. And we sing for Rivka, who survived long enough to teach us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep living when everyone else is gone. The lullaby saved her life in the forest. But telling her story, that's what finally set her free. And now it's ours to carry. We are witnesses. We remember. And we sing.
We're all witnesses to something. And subscribe, because every week I share stories like this. Real history, real pain, real courage. Don't let these stories die in silence. Pass them on.